Sarah said I could say a few things. Given that I drove 1,402 miles to get here, I appreciate that opportunity. My name is Mortenson. I'm an higher education policy analyst. I've been doing this sort of thing since 1970, which means I've been doing it for about 46 years now. That means that I'm old, starting to lose my mind. And as I've studied the aging process, it turns out the first mental functions to go are located in the frontal lobes of the brain. And this is where social control is exercised. So I'm sort of one of those typical old men that's starting to lose his mind. And I just comes out here. But Sarah's encouraged me to be a little bit more disciplined and productive in what I want to say. As I've been studying college affordability for various years.
Sarah, can somebody help on the sound because we can't hear even what our host is saying?
That's been the problem all that time. There's nothing you can say. Yeah, if you come down there, you can come around the front row if you want us to come down. There's nothing that you can do. It's the instructions.
It's fine. Just keep going, Tom.
I'm sorry.
I've got a pretty good idea what these guys are going to say, and I'm not sure if they need to hear the details of what I have to say. But I've been studying college affordability for 46 years. One of my original teachers, even though I was never a student at the University of Wisconsin, was Lee Hansen, who introduced me to the idea of regressive financing of higher educational opportunity. We spent an awful lot of money on wealthy students, and we take a very good care of our students from lower income backgrounds attending less well-funded public institutions. We also introduced the idea of challenging the notion that the Pell Grant really effectively met the financial needs of students, or if it did, there were other intervening factors that were getting in the way because he couldn't find his analysis of Census Bureau data. The Pell Grant program had really fostered higher educational opportunity. I thought he was wrong, and I spent most of my 46 years trying to refute that original finding. It came at a very sensitive time politically when Stockton and Ronald Reagan were considering zeroing out all federal funding for education. But my analysis has been quantitative. That is, I use data sets like the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study and study things like college affordability, unmet financial need, student work loan burdens, net price to family. These are the traditional metrics of econometricians when we're looking at questions of college affordability. I spent a very long time really following up on Lee's original work from the early 1980s, analyzing census bureau data by quartiles of family income, who actually gets a college degree. And as other people have cited that same data, my analysis, which really began with Lee's work, roughly 10% of students in the bottom quartile of the family income distribution are going to complete a bachelor's degree by age 24, compared to about 65% of kids who were born into the top quartile of the family income. They didn't earn it, they certainly took advantage of it, but the kids born into low-income families have, by every conceivable measure, suffered badly, particularly since about 1980, in terms of higher educational opportunity. So I came to this conference with the idea that I was going to learn from you. And I want to thank Sarah, thank Allison, and thank their staff that put this conference together. And I certainly want to thank those who spoke at this conference and taught me so much about what it means to have a very large unmet financial need, or what it means to have a very large student work loan burden studied for 46 years. Things about food and housing insecurity, mental health issues, and from other data sources, other people that are doing work on college textbooks, hearing stories that 50 to 80% of the lowest income kids are not buying their college textbooks for the courses that they signed up for and paid for because they can't afford it. I'm concerned about this because a year ago, a fellow wrote a column appeared in the Wall Street Journal saying that alleged problems of college affordability for some students were actually a myth. And it was just a masterful piece of misdirection, misinformation, and frankly, deception. The unfortunate problem is that the author of this piece that appeared in the Wall Street Journal, his name is Lamar Alexander. He's a senator from Tennessee, and he's chairman of the Senate Health Committee that is now charged with reauthorizing the Higher Education Act. And I can tell you folks, I'm scared stiff about this next reauthorization if he remains in charge after the election, given his views that there is no problem with college affordability. Is there anybody here from Tennessee that might be able to reach their senator and start to educate him about the realities that these lowest income students face in financing? I don't see anybody, but if you know anybody from Tennessee, they have to reach their senator and acquaint him with what those of us that have been here for 2 days and listening to these wonderfully motivated, very well prepared, extremely informative presenters have had to say. Apparently he knows nothing about what you know from face-to-face experience with students. A couple of other brief comments before I introduce our panelists here. I've been fortunate enough to attend meetings in Europe each year called the European Access Network. And these are people that provide services to needy students to help them succeed in college. What we call low-income first generation, they may not use exactly those terms. Europeans seem to be more comfortable with something called socioeconomic status. And I realize that you're a sociologist, you know what that means. But I defy anybody to say my socioeconomic status is. It's an obscure research term, and I'm much more comfortable with terms like first generation and low-income students. But when I meet with these Europeans, I'm struck by the enormous differences in their approach to higher educational opportunity support versus what we do in this country. In Europe, these programs tend to be top-down. They come from government at the highest levels. There are national commissions, there are white papers. Out of this comes policy and programs and funding that support the activities that are reported by practitioners like the European Access Network. We'll be meeting in Dublin in another month. If you want to go, it's a great place to go visit. I promise you 2 days of very exciting presentations by the Europeans working on these issues. But I lay that out in contrast with what I heard today, what seems to work in America. If anything, we're a bottoms-up orientation here in the United States. People see a problem, they start doing something, they talk to other people. Yes, you got a problem, they try to find some money, they organize the program, and government is really not the leader on these kinds of programs. It comes from the bottom up in the United States. In doing so, these programs have a lot of life to them, a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation that I don't always see in the European approach. I'm going to make one final comment before I introduce the speakers. For a long time, I've been bothered by our failure in the public policy process to acknowledge the consequences of the decisions Anybody who works in education expects a very long-term payoff from the efforts they make today. Our politicians tend to be concerned about the next election. Maybe this November is their time frame. And the decisions they make, policy choices they make, programs that they fund are based on getting reelected. So we have a very short-term time frame that we're stuck with in this democratic process in the United States. For a long time, I've admired the work of econometricians that are able to model the entire economy of the United States and provide answers back to policymakers about what happens if you increase taxes here, what kinds of economic outcomes can you expect over here, how will business change, what will happen to income, what will happen to tax revenues, and so on. I challenge the sociological community, the sociologists. I know I'm in Wisconsin. It's a hotbed of sociology. To build a sociometric model of society that would give us answers to questions about, based on the decisions we make today, policy, programs, funding, what are the consequences for society as best we can envision society 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 or more years down the road, for that matter, 50 or 100 years down the road. And a model like this would not be built off of economics, although it would use economics. It would begin with demographics, which has to be the mother of all public policy analysis. You have to know the populations that you're serving. And the concern I have is that the political process only makes very short-term, immediate kinds of decisions, and is just for, at least since 1980, been unable to see the future in terms of the consequences of the policy choices we make today. I believe it's a fatal flaw in our policy-making system. We simply lack long-term time horizons, ability to recognize and expect politicians to make decisions that we, based on the best research, we have the best understanding of the purpose and the benefits of the investments in education. We simply are not making decisions with long-term consequences, and we're making decisions for short-term political or expedient business decisions, ignoring the long-term demographic, social welfare consequences of our failure to make constructive investment decisions today. I know I'm in Wisconsin, hotbed of sociology. I wish the sociologists would take on a challenge like this and begin creating models that would give us a better understanding of what the future of this country would look like based on the choices we make today. We're not making those choices right now. We're making bad choices, or we're making choices like Mr. Lamar Alexander would have us make, based on an acceptance that the status quo is being adequate. When everything that I've heard here for the last 2 days said the system is really a mess and it requires much bolder, much broader, much deeper commitment to addressing the changes that need to be made today. We're going to have a more prosperous and healthy society 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road when the kids we're dealing with are going to be functioning or not functioning in society and in the economy. With that, I want to introduce my fellow panelists up here today. Chi Hang Lee is Vice President for Public Policy and External Relations for the Association of Community Colleges Trustees, ACCT, whose letters we see up here. Educated at Boston University and George Washington University in political management. Boy, you got a job today. What a mess we're functioning right now. Wick Sloane, I think we've heard him several times at this conference. Bunker Hill Community College in Boston has been writing about hunger on college campuses since 2012. One of the pieces that I read Pell grant recipient a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day, at least until we come up with a better idea. 2013. Dealing with this for years now. And Michael Sorrell, whom I met several years ago at Quinn College in Dallas, where he has been president. I'm going to let Michael tell this story, but I'm going to bait you, all of you, with a little background. Michael is the only person I've ever met who has died. And I mean this. Michael experienced cardiac death. And he's still with us. But the best part of the story is he was brought back to life by his wife's kiss. Now, I'll let him explain that, but you're going to have to wait until you get to the other two.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a terrific story. Okay. Gene, why don't you start us off? Thank you.
So this session is about looking to the future, and I think one of the things that you have to do to look to the future is kind of figure out how you got here. And before I begin, I would like to recognize one individual in the audience. He's one of my board members, Vernon Young from Marine Park Technical College. He's the chair of the board. He has been a passionate sponsor of a lot of our policy work in Washington, D.C., and has brought issues to us that we thought was worthy of the conversation. And one of those issues was around mental health, and we see the byproduct of the report that we just did to discuss to learn. So basically in 2009, our association began a process of looking at internally about our policy agenda. And one of the things that with the new Obama administration, President Obama in 2009 announced that he wanted to increase credentials across the system, get America back to number one in terms of associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees. And our board took that mantle up and asked staff to consider what type of policies and agenda items that would kind of lead to this effort. The vision for our board and for our association was called Access for Success. And as open access institutions, we already have access program. But how do we get to the success part? And I think that was one of the conundrums for us in terms of how do we assist our students to ultimately compete. And so obviously we worked on our financial aid issues. We had a significant increase in the Pell Grant program. We have the authorization and permanent authorization now, the American Opportunity Tax Credit. We have the tax grants that Gina mentioned a little while ago, which is $2 million for community colleges. And all that being said, it's still not enough. And so our association embarked to look around at some of the policymakers and organizations that were doing some good work. We have been partnering with Single Stop USA to do single stop signs across this country. And then we started working with Sarah a little bit on that issue, but also taking a look at how do we determine the total cost of attendance? How can we help students get the additional aid that's necessary to complete? And I think this is where the meat of the conversation is about the future. And I think one of the things that Gina mentioned, and I thought about it for a couple of minutes, is she says we have to thread all these pieces together. And as it's difficult when you think about all the issues from financial aid to food insecurity, homelessness, emergency aid, mental health, child care, all those pieces are in itself so different. They have different stakeholders involved. They have different funding mechanisms. Some may be the foundation, might be the state government, something might be a charitable contribution. But how do we wrap all of these various pieces together? And as she was talking, I was just thinking, well, one, I don't necessarily know if it's all threaded together, but then it dawned upon me, it comes back to what our board, the vision of our board, and that was success and completion. And if you take that mantra of how do we help a student complete, all these pieces come together. And I think holistically, as you know, I know there's for your private institutions, for your public, very selective for your public out in the crowd, for your more open access institutions. Obviously, have our technical colleges in this room and our community colleges. But what is all of our students essentially face the same type of issues? You know, obviously, some issues are a little bit more predominantly in one sector or another. But all the issues that we discussed for the last 2 days are going to arise, and how do we help our students? And I think some of the people here throughout the last couple of days have asked, how do we advocate for certain things? And I think it ultimately comes back to how do we, as a group here, say that we want to help students succeed, lead a better life, you know, and help their students and help their children. And that in itself should be a sufficient answer, and all these pieces are just parts of the puzzle to get that student through the door and get their diploma. And I'm hopeful this convening will lead to other convenings as we can have this discussion. But I do I wanted that conversation to kind of happen because I've heard this kind of conversation going back and forth. It's like, how do we push this? How do we push that? And I think everybody in this room and all the speakers, and especially for the students that were here on stage yesterday, our students go through enormous obstacles to get what they need to get to where they need to go. And I told my fellow speakers a story. I was at Miami-Dade College in 2010. And I met one of our students there. She was a second-year nursing student. And she was in the process of adopting her nephew and her niece. Her older sister, who was an addict, and so therefore she was in the process of adopting these 2 children. Essentially a child adopting a child, 2 children. Her parents did not want her to do this. Her parents did not particularly care to take care of the grandchildren. So she was doing all of this, succeeding in school. And the one thing that really kind of got me and was part of this whole conversation, besides the fact that she was doing all of this, was that her parents were charging her rent. Even though she was taking care of their grandchildren, she was going to school, she was doing all of this, and her parents were charging her rent. And I think that one of the things that we have to keep in mind as part of our success conversation is that success is very different for very different people. And I think that is also part of this picture, is that, and this is where when you advocate, especially in Washington, D.C., I've been to private institutions, so I'm guilty of this too. People have a conception of what college looks like, and especially congressional staff. And it is important as you, and I think all of you in the room that are with the institution, I encourage you to bring your congressional staff, invite them to your district, invite them to your college, and have them meet with their students. That provides them an earthly picture of those students, not just some cookie cutter picture on your, the information that you pass out, the bright shiny faces, next to the big monuments on campus and football fields. That is, so that is what drives us going forward, is how do we help our students succeed? And all these pieces are so vital to us because ultimately we're going to have some solutions to these problems for us to get these students to success. So I'll leave it to you.
This morning, pointing out that we thought we were alone, and it turned out that we were only isolated. And I've just been so happy to meet everyone and be inspired, and so just thank you all. I wish I could stay forever. In looking to the future even more immediately, by my position on this panel, you're waiting to hear from a guy who came back from the dead. So I'm not quite sure what I can say that's going to top that. I will be succinct in light of that. I think looking to the future, first I just have to admit the future is pretty grim. And I don't say that to be discouraged, but I just say that to be realistic. And it just is. And I'm talking to people in the last 2 days, we all share the idea that in our jobs we can save 1 or 2 lives every day, and that makes us feel terrific. But the ship is still sinking. And so I just think we have to just acknowledge how incredibly difficult what we face is. That said, I'm not afraid of it. What makes me the most excited is that there's, for the future, my hopes that I'll just project is that there's now 100 plus of us. And I hope that we use that voice together, and that we find a way to connect us all, and when it's time to say something, we say it together. I don't think it matters that we're from different states and places, but if we can start getting blasts of 100 emails, 100 phone calls to people, that's the kind of thing that can make a difference. I just passionately believe that. And so my commitment looking to the future is that please call on me. If you need me to make a phone call, if you want me to email the senator, I'll do anything any of you ask me to do, just to add one more voice to this cause. And I hope we do that for all of us. In looking to the future, in the difficulty of it, and again, I'm trying to be realistic, but when I look at the things I do every day, they're putting fingers in the dikes, and helping one student get to a 4-year school, helping one student get some food. I think in the daily routine, what I hope we can do is we do have to acknowledge the total absurdity and moral outrage of the situation we're facing every day. As I said in my column this morning, I haven't screamed yet, and I won't. But I think that the piece here is that a lot of the little things we're working on are within the bigger context, and it's crazy that these students get so little funding. It's crazy that $5,800 is all a low-income student can get when the subsidy at Williams, at Yale, at Harvard, from the federal government is depending on your assumptions, $30,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and no, that's not need-based. It's absurd that we say that we're running out of money for Pell grants or something when the federal government is letting universities charge 60% for their indirect cost reimbursement rates. It's absurd that Williams College can take tax-deferred money for and buy indoor golf nets, and we're sitting here talking about shelter and food. And I just think we got to put that on the table. Two causes that have always said meant a lot to me are emancipation and women's suffrage. And the thing about them was that there were small voices who started, and it took more than 100 years to get there. But they didn't stop talking about how absurd the big picture was. So I hope in the future we keep that in mind and do that. My other hope that I can't figure out is that we find a way to harness democracy in this, because it still I understand, and in one way, but I don't in the other, that low-income students have all the votes, and the community colleges and the institutions we serve, there's more of them than the other people, and having $1 million versus none certainly makes a difference in our political system, but voting counts. Burying senators in phone calls and emails counts, putting letters to the editor counts, and it just makes no sense to me, or it makes me sad that our students have all the votes, and because we haven't represented them well enough, they have the least amount of money. So my dream would be to come back here in a year and find out that we harness tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students voting in getting this going, because I don't see a way of making such a big picture in that. And I guess my piece is in looking at this, that I served on a school board once, and where democracy comes in, I'm hardly an idealist, but everybody I know who served in minor political office and harnessed democracy has been astounded at what one person can pull off. And I think it's everything that's said about big money in politics is true, but I think too often we made the assumption that cancels out what we can do. So that's my hope for the future, is that we take our 100 voices that we've met over the last 2 days, thanks to Sarah, and get students out there to raise their voices as well. And I have to say, as a first step for all of us getting our voices out, I hope you'll go home and write your senators and write your senators and call your local newspaper and talk to the presidents of your institutions and throw down the Hope Lab free lunch program and say, let's get moving on this. It's an irrefutable pitch. I don't mean politically, I mean intellectually. That we know that students in K-12 need lunch, and then we take it away, and then we wonder why students aren't completing college. So with that, I will defer to the guy who came back from the day.
So we're hard one to live down. So I'm going to tell you that story, but I'm not going to lead with that story, because I think if I did, that might dominate my message. And the message that I want you to understand is what the future looks like from our perspective. And to do that, I need you to understand how I wound up being a college president. I did not travel the conventional path to academia. Before I became a college president, I had never had a job in any form of education. I had never even taken an education class. I was a corporate security lawyer. I had been an entrepreneur. I worked in the White House. People tease me about having career ADD. But the reality of it is, I was working with a group of people to buy an NBA franchise when I was called by the chair of the board and asked if I'd be interested in becoming the president of the college. Now, a little tip for you is if people call you and offer you a job you didn't apply for, something's wrong. Okay? It was a job no one else wanted. I understand that, because you don't offer it to a guy that didn't apply for it. All right? So, but I took over a school that was the antithesis of everything that my life had been up until that moment. When I called my sisters and talked to her about being offered the job, she is a public school teacher in inner city Chicago. And she said to me, she said, Mike, you don't know the students that you're about to be charged with caring for. And I said, I feel like you're, kind of being offensive. She said, no. She said, you have an amazing servant's heart. You donate money, you donate your time. She said, but poverty is different. Because what you're about to do, you can't ever go home again. Right? She said, we didn't grow up with this. My family did very, very well. My father went to college. lived in a single-family home in New Orleans, but grew up to be a very successful entrepreneur. My mother grew up dirt poor in rural Louisiana, went to Dillon University, which is an HBCU. My grandmother went there as well. And my mother's family was so poor that when they sent my mother and her first cousin, which raised like her sister, to college together, they couldn't afford clothes and tuition for the girls. So they sent them with one pair of clothing. Not a problem, except for this fact. My mother was 5'11", my aunt was 5'5". So when you do that, that meant every other day someone looked ridiculous. So these schools, this environment, I went to Oakland, Duke, and Penn, had a radically different life than the students that I am charged with educating. At Paul Quinn, 83% of our students are Pell Grant eligible. 70% of our students have 0 EFC. Right? We are an institution that is 10 minutes south of downtown Dallas, but we're 10 minutes to the wrong direction of Dallas. If you live in the northern part of the city of Dallas, you have an amazing life. You have everything you could ever want. If you live to the south of Dallas, you may wind up in one of the highest areas of concentrated poverty, not just in the city, but the state. We are in a food desert. We are in a rail desert. Everything is harder in that part of the community. My average student's entrance scores and GPAs are 2.6, a 16.5, 17 on the ACT, 1132 on the SAT, and that's all 3 sections. So my students don't look like the students I went to school with. So I take this job, and I realize everything's broken at the institution. Everything's broken. We have to blow it up and start from scratch. But we're doing that in a higher ed environment where people are awfully judgmental. Right? I mean, people sit up high and render their opinions about institutions that none of them have not only attended, but they have never even bothered to get to know. And because of that, we are forced to live on the edge. So I started, and I think, well, you know, urban colleges should address the issues of the communities they serve. That seemed reasonable to me. So I thought, we're going to deal with health and wellness. Now, my ignorance, my naivete, or my arrogance was that the way you dealt with health and wellness was you build a state-of-the-art fitness facility. Right? Because if that's what you think about it, you grow up in an upper middle class environment. But how stupid are you if your students can't eat building a fitness center? So we decided we were going to tackle the food desert issue. And for 2 years, no one helped us. Okay, we have 146 acres of land. We offered free land, and no one took us up. Finally, a friend of mine who's been trying to help us find brokers, find people, find businesses to come to campus, talked to somebody, and they told him that the people in that neighborhood didn't look like their customers. So the neighborhood is 97, 98% black. It is a neighborhood that is very, very impoverished, but there are good people in that neighborhood. And just because you didn't make a lot of money doesn't mean that you don't deserve a great life. So we fought back. So got caught a break. A very wealthy individual called one day out of the blue because the Lord works in mysterious ways. In my life, I am convinced that the Lord has had a plan. And get a random phone call from a very wealthy individual. I thought it was a great call because no one wealthy was calling me at Paul Quinn during this period of time. And says, hey, you know, I'm in travel pro, I'd like to go to lunch. And I'm still thinking it's a prank call from one of my friends. I'm thinking my friends are really jerks. But I'm going to go to lunch with my friend, and I'm going to make them buy me lunch with this bad joke. Turns out it was really travel pro. And we go to lunch, and we're talking, and we start talking about food and security issues. And I mentioned that the people in our neighborhood should get a grocery store. There's no grocery store, it's ridiculous. He says, you know what I'm really passionate about? I'm really passionate about community gardens. Now, I'm not claiming to be the smartest man in the world, but I know how to read the tea So he agrees to fund a community garden. We had terminated the football program at the school. That was the first thing I did as a college president. And because we couldn't afford it, the team was terrible, and we had bigger issues and priorities. So I said, look, why don't we put the community garden on the football field? So he loved it, was telling Pepsi about the story, and the folks at Pepsi loved it. So they come to visit, and we convinced them that we're going to turn the whole football field into an organic farm. Because you need food, not football. So we've grown over 40,000 pounds of food, and we stand for the proposition that you don't have to be an expert to do anything. We had no one on the staff who knew anything about farming. Our original farm manager, the reason she wound up with the job was because she was an economics major at an all-women's college. And it's a business. So, I mean, it's a business. I mean, that much we figured out. Now, mind you, that's how you wind up with a farm with no irrigation system other than hoses. But we got better at it, and it's thriving now. And we give away 10% of everything that we grow. But we had to stand up for ourselves. And that's really the point of the story that I want to share with you. We stood up for ourselves again in the city trying to turn. By the way, our neighborhood is closer to the city garbage dump than it is a grocery store. Just think about what that says to the people of that community. Right now, think about it again when the city tries to convert the garbage dump into a mega garbage dump. We want to turn it into one of the largest garbage dumps in the Southwest. So we stood up and we fought back, and my students fought back. And we created a movement called We Are Not Trash. And the students came up with great slogans, groceries, not garbage. And we protested. We took the students, in fact, the whole school went down. The other thing you could have said, we're very, very small. So we took the entire institution down to protest. And we fought back, and we fought back, and we continue to use our voice and everything in our research to fought back. We've gained a certain amount of notoriety lately because we changed our tuition law. We were originally charging $23,800, which isn't ridiculous. And I mean, it's really not, but if your students can't afford it, what does it matter? So our students couldn't afford it. And if you know your students, by the end of every school year, with the exception of this year, which I'm very heartbroken about, I know all my students. I know their names, I know their stories. And when you know your students, their pain, their heartache becomes your pain. And our students couldn't afford it. They weren't trying to cheat the system, they just didn't have it. So we took a step back and said, what are we collecting? What really makes sense? What can we afford to run the school for? We were really collecting $14,000. That's what we're going to charge those schools. Right? Our students are all working. By the way, so does everyone else's students. Over 75% of the students today work more than 20 hours a week. So this notion that students aren't working is a fallacy. Our students were working, but they were working bad jobs. They were working midnight shifts. They were working what they could get. And those jobs are compromising their academic potential. So we said, why don't we pull learning and working in together? So we are the first urban work college in the country. Our students work between 10 to 20 hours a week in jobs that are related to their career interests, which gives them a rigorous academic environment and real-world work experience, which allows them to have a competitive edge when they step out. Because again, my students are Pell grade students who come from under-resourced communities. No one's giving them summer internships. If you are a Pell grade family, you have a long-term dysfunctional relationship with work and life. So why don't we not judge them? Why don't we help them and support them? So we created a school, which is what I think the future is going to look like. And we have said, you know what, forget about whether or not you fit at a school where people charge $60,000 a year. We're going to give you your own school, where you do extraordinary things, where people cater to you in your reality, and where you don't go into massive debt to graduate. You come to Quinn, you graduate worth $9,000 a day, right? That's it. You don't have to worry about getting a job because you have been working the entire time. In the last 2 years, you work off campus in jobs in the area that you can go work when you graduate, right? So these things, this is a common sense approach to solving the problems of the community. We think, we call it the new urban college model. We think urban colleges should turn themselves outward and address the issues of the communities they serve. Our community's issues, access to food, so we turn the football field into a park. Our community's issues, they can't afford to go to school, so we made a model that they could afford. Our community's issues, they're underprepared for the workforce, so we created a leveling up process and strategy so that the students spend 4 years working under close supervision so they can be ready to succeed when they graduate. We adjust dreams. If you come to us and you tell us you want to be a physician's assistant, I think that's a noble field. But if you're a physician's assistant because that's truly what you want to do, great. But if you're a physician's assistant because someone told you medical school is too hard for you, then something is wrong with that. So we encourage our students to dream bigger dreams and then support them on the way there. So this is what the future looks like. It looks like schools that in real time adjust and adapt to the needs of the students and the communities they serve. And when they do that, they do it in a way that challenges the previously held notion of what higher education looks like, what community engagement looks like. I don't believe in civic engagement the way it's traditionally done in schools today. I think that's poverty tourism, all right?
Yes.
You send your students out you send your students out to be engaged for a semester in people's lives, and then they lead those people to their lives that are unimproved. That is one of the worst things I have ever heard. So we don't do that. We're going to engage, we're going to move the needle. Our institutional ethos is we don't agree. The needs of the community supersede the wants of the individual. Leave places better than you found. Now, I have talked that way more than a lot of times. I apologize to my colleagues. I will leave you with the story of my rebirth or resurrection or just plain fool's luck. I suffered something called sudden cardiac death, and I literally died. The only reason that I survived was because my girlfriend at the time was there and did CPR, called 911, and they got to the house. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and they found me there, but I was flatlined. So they had to shock me several times in order to bring me back to life. Now, the reality of it is, and they didn't tell me this until many weeks later, when that happens to you outside of a hospital, you have less than a 2.5% chance of living and having all of your faculty. So, no one can explain why it happened. I didn't have any of the risk factors. I don't drink, I don't smoke. With the occasion of a strong fondness for chocolate chip cookies and peach cobbler, I don't eat red meat, I don't eat fried foods, so it shouldn't have happened. But it did happen. And, it's increasingly beginning to look like it happened because it was the second stage of my life where I was supposed to do more than chase wealth, right? And if that's what it was saying for, I can't think of a better way to do it. Now, I will tell you something. I married the woman that saved my life. Right? I mean, right. That's a dating, that's the Lord saying, fool. Let me help you, right? Because you are about to buck yourself. But the other thing about it too is she now wins every argument in the house. Right? But I just want to thank Sarah as well for the opportunity to be here and for this important work. And just encourage everyone, if Paul Quinn College can do this, and we have our only real resources is the absolute obsession to leave places better than we found. We have less than $10 million in the endowment, and I'm being generous. We don't have wealthy students and we don't have wealthy loans, but we have a wealthy soul, and we believe in serving others. That's the future.
We have some time for questions. I have to say, I'm so sad that more of us are not here, but you all are so lucky. Because all of these folks are amazing, and if you have questions for them, why don't we go ahead and do that?
outside higher education into higher education, because they bring very different ways of looking at things. And I think, and I come from a student affairs background. My degree is in student affairs, and I've moved in and out of the field. And I feel like there's been a lot of sort of almost incestuous at this point, where like people are coming up in the field and not learning about the way things are done outside of higher education. I'm really curious, how did you build your team that helped you to do this? Because you're amazing, but I also imagine you probably didn't do it all by yourself. If you did, good for you. But I'm curious how did you think about building your team of people to do this? And where did you look for those folks?
So we look everywhere. Right? I mean, I don't care what your background is. I just care that you have talent, that you will work hard, and you're capable of loving something very good yourself. Now that may seem like a romantic notion to people, but you'd be shocked at how many people are incapable of loving something more than themselves. And we start to identify that in the interview process. So for example, you can send us your resume and say, this is the job I want. We might look at your resume and say, we don't think that's the job you're best at, or that's not the job the institution needs your talents to do it. We need you here. Are you open to serving in this capacity? And either they are or they aren't. If they aren't, then you're not our people. Right? If you are, then let's have that conversation. We recruit in some very unlikely places. Teach for America has been a wonderful place for us, because those folks tend to be mission-centered. Now, we can take issue with the concept of Teach for America, but we cannot take issue with the fact that they attract really smart people who are willing to work ridiculously long hours for really not very much money under the idea that they can change the world. That's like my perfect people, right? So we recruit people from there. We also recruit people from outside of higher education. We don't have tenure at our school. Right? It just never had it. Doesn't really make financial sense to us. But if the notion of tenure is about protecting academic freedom, but I promise you, you're going to have your academic freedom, right? And that, I believe I'm a lawyer, right? So freedom of speech is central to everything that I've ever known. So we can protect your freedom of speech while creating an institution that is forward-facing. And so, and we're a private school, so it's a little bit easier as well, right? So ironically, the more I get out and speak, the more resumes we get, right? So that helps tremendously. We have lots of our students now who want to stay, which is really wonderful. So we just try and stay inspired. And one of the things about the way we work is it's exhausting. I've been there 9 years, and the staff has, over 90% of the people are new in the last 9 years. Right? Now, it's leveled off in the last 4 years. You're seeing people kind of stay, but we're getting better people now. Because here's the other thing I learned about folks in higher education. They are not gunslingers. Right? Like, what passes for innovative and entrepreneurial? I'm like, come on. So, they tend to be risk averse. And this is risky. 9 years ago, we were one of the worst schools in the country. And I'm not making that up, but we absolutely were one of the worst schools in the country. So when I would go to people and say, I got a great opportunity for you. We're about to change the world. They would look at me and say, you might not even be open in 2 years. I was like, yeah, we're going to go in 2 years. Let's talk about changing the world. So I said it to say, we will find talent any place, in every place. And all I ask people is that they be open to reimagine the possibilities of what higher education looks like and what we all can do. Because, we have a dress code. We have a clothes closet. Everybody finds their way into the classroom. Because I don't know how you can lead if you don't actually know who you're leading. We closed a lot of the other classrooms and put the classroom in the administration building. so that the students and the staff see each other in every context, right? I mean, we should just do it differently, but we love it.
Do you know what percentage of your students, if any, are students with children? And this is my area of expertise, I would give anything to move to a warmer climate, so. After you answer that, I can still do my resume.
I like your style. So, we have, I don't know the percentage, right? I know that we are building an apartment complex, and the apartment complex is going to have students, single mothers, and teachers. Right, not professors, but teachers. We're creating an integrated living model, a community model, so that individuals have the opportunity to more successfully engage in each other's lives at various stages. So we have to make that easy, but I also believe you have to have conversations about the reality of family planning. Because if you don't have the money, every orientation I give a speech, and I tell my students, I ask them, how many of you have $1.50 in your pocket? And everyone raises their hand. Say, how many of you have $300,000 in your pocket? And no one raises their hand. I said, all right, if you have $300,000 that you can afford to raise a child in the Southern City. If you don't have $300,000, but you have $1.50, you can afford country shelters. I'm not telling you not to have kids. I'm telling you to stop repeating the cycle. Right? Now, many of our young ladies and young men have them, and then we love them, we treat the children as they are our own, and we help that student and that child have access to a better life. We opened up a charter school on our campus this year, so now we have that ability. The apartment complex is also going to have daycare, it's going to have academic enrichment programs, because ironically, under-resourced communities don't have academic enrichment programs. My child has been in academic enrichment program since he was 2. Right? He'll take the SAT for the first time in 7th or 8th grade. Why should my child have those advantages and the people in my neighborhood, community, and college don't, when I know how important those things are? So that's how we try to approach. So I don't have a percentage for you, but I just tell you that we handle it the best way we can, but we're about to do a whole lot.
Since I'm sitting here and nobody has a question,
We
I'd
have
like to
questions.
applaud the hope, oh, there is one.
This is Wisconsin. Hi, everybody. I just want to say to the 3 panelists, you too. Everyone in this room is so amazing how we're coming together to do something that is changing not only where we're at, but the whole entire nation and hopefully internationally. But I'm a mother of 3, and before I even came to Wisconsin, before I even became a real serious artist and stopped doubting myself, I was struggling a lot with college, with the idea and the concept of how does it even make sense for me to get a diploma and get my degree and things like that when I might not even get the field job that I'm desiring and studying for, and then I'm also going to end up in debt. And I got very young, so with this, going after a traditional route of having a family, while at the same time contemplating and struggling with the thought of, well, I should be this college student, I should be experiencing the education and all these things, this higher walk. But, I would have never dreamt or dreamed to have come this far in life and how God, I truly believe how God has brought me this far. And during my young 20s, I'm 27, so I'm not like far off. I don't know why I said that, but my early times,
You're still in your early time.
I'm just saying, what this man right here, the first one said, I forget your name, sorry. Success does come in so many different shapes and forms and ways, and I still don't find myself
that piece of paper that tells me I made it, you know? And so just seeing all of us come together is more than inspirational. Like, it actually moves my soul, because what I've done personally in my life was taking all the talents, all the gifts that God has given me, and use that to help advocate, and use that to help, personally, my philosophy is, if I'm going to be good, then just be good. And so recently I bought a nonprofit organization. I spent out of my own money, my own pockets, considering I have 3 kids. I just bought the whole cheerleading squad and uniforms. And that was the most tremendous, almost craziest thing that I have ever done. I asked my husband, we talked, and he said, we're going to do this. And we did. And now it's just all about waiting to see kids really aspire to go higher. And also letting them know that, it is a struggle, but you've got to keep going. Because there is people out there, obviously, that really do care, and they really do want to change the world. We really want to try to make this a better place for the future. Because I know for me, I'm a homeschooler at that, and I grew up in the APS system, and I have this bittersweet thing with the MPS district, because I feel that, I didn't get the best education that prepped me for college, and I didn't get this, and I didn't get that, but at the same time, I just look at where I'm at now, and somewhere along the line, I had a few good teachers that, like you guys here, that said, we're going to put some light in you so that you can do the same when you get older. So I just want to say to everybody, this is amazing, truly amazing, and I'm highly inspired, and whoever wants my resume, I'm more than willing to send it. But just thank you guys. I'm just honored to be here. Thank you all. So, Steve has a question.
My question for Christine. At community colleges now, a lot of students have children, and they also work, and they try to balance out taking care of the kids while working and going to school. And the numbers that I've seen is that the percentage of community colleges that actually buy childcare is declining, while the number of students that have kids is going up. So I'm wondering what is being done to reverse this trend.
So there is a federal program called Child Care Means Access for Parents, I think, describing the term, but it is a program that has been funded with somewhere in the neighborhood of around $12 to $10 million annually. I think one of the things, and this is kind of an interesting subject, because as part of my work, I meet a lot of community colleges across this country. And a couple of them have even told me they have closed their child care centers, and that's why. And they said the enrollment has been down, which is kind of interesting in that context. But I think as part of this broader conversation, and Paul Quinn College is doing this, is that I think colleges need to kind of understand the work-life demographics of our students. I know that during luncheon we had a communication that we learned about what the Tacoma Housing Authority is doing with Tacoma Community College. And I think those are some of the conundrums that we have, and these are some of the rules and regulations about who can, and we had a student here yesterday talking a little bit about why he was homeless, because he couldn't stay with his sister. The Public Housing Authority wouldn't allow him to stay with his sister. And I think we as a society, we as policymakers, we the people who are in the room are policymakers who actually work for our government and state government, have to kind of evaluate how we do some of these policies and whether or not they are sound policies. Should you have a family? Should you be able to have a family on the top of the voucher that's housing authority provided? Should you be able to have a family member stay with you, not full time, but at least periodically? And I think those are things that we that unless they're brought to our attention, it's difficult for us to
I see my colleague Ann Coles, and we have a taxi arriving at 4:29, and I haven't forgotten. We will be home in time.
Take one of my questions.
Me? Oh, thank you. By the way, thank you so much. So I guess this isn't a question, I suppose this is a final comment. Thank you. So, I'm so grateful to Sarah and the lab for putting this together because, as Sarah and they know, I was a homeless student for about 5 years in college, and I learned this much more recently. Like, my mom was also homeless when she was my age, so it's just this process. And you know, it's so interesting because I could not have imagined that this space would exist because I think I have been so accustomed to thinking that I ought to be ashamed that the only way to inspire socioeconomic growth or growth from a low-income student to change their stars or their stripes, so to speak, is to make them be ashamed of that. Because if you give them the idea that it's okay and that it's real and that it's valid, maybe they'll want to stay there. But I can't tell you how much I so appreciate just everyone that comes to this space, because I can't tell you, I never thought y'all existed. And I'm so sorry, I'm definitely trying not to cry.
Where do you go to school?
Yes, I've been at UW-Madison with Sarah and these great lab folks. And I transferred from the University of Wisconsin